President, let me begin by thanking my good friend, Senator from Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal, for his partnership, not just on these issues and a lot of matters before the Judiciary Committee generally. But we and others have come to the floor today to celebrate yesterday. Mr. President, yesterday, Americans and states across the country came out to participate in a tradition as old as the nation itself, casting their ballot in a democratic election. And while ballots are still being processed and final results will come in the coming days, it's safe to say that thanks to the hardworking and unsung heroes known as election workers and volunteers across the country, these elections largely went off smoothly and successfully. Because of their work in states like Virginia and New Jersey, we saw a record turnout. Because of their work in cities like New York, we saw the highest turnout there since 1969 in a municipal election. From a race for state Supreme Court justices in the state of Pennsylvania to a statewide proposition in my home state of California, Americans showed up in overwhelming numbers to say in one loud and clear voice that they've had enough. The question after an election is always, so what message did the voters say? What was the mandate when it comes to a high turnout election with larger than expected margins? The takeaway is this: enough of the Republican chaos, enough of the power grabs, enough of the corruption, and enough of Trump's billionaire assault on working families. That's the power of democracy. When we're able to send that type of a message, the people send that type of a message, that loud of a message, by exercising their right to vote. But even after the success of last night, let's also be clear about this. One free and fair election does not guarantee the next one. We have to fight to ensure future elections. We have to keep asking ourselves, what do we do now, between now and next November, to protect the next election? Because at this very moment, the president and his allies are doing everything they can to rig the rules of the game. The reality is that at some point over the last couple of months, the president came to a harsh realization. We've known his policies have been bad ones. We've known they've been harmful. He's figured out his policies are also now very unpopular. Prices on everything from groceries to housing to energy bills are going up. Healthcare premiums are spiking. SNAP benefits are being cut. But for the billionaire class, things are just fine because Trump gave them the tax cut that they wanted, and somehow there's now funding for a ballroom. Americans, though, are fired up. They're angry at a president and a party that are looking out for themselves more than they're looking out for the country as a whole. But rather than change their policies that are causing such harm, instead of changing their policies before the midterm elections, President Trump and Republicans would rather change the rules. And we have a responsibility to sound the alarm before it's too late. Let me revisit my home state of California, where voters came out in big numbers to pass Proposition 50 by a wide margin. Why? We're not celebrating a mid-decade redistricting. Proposition 50 passed because they've been waiting to respond to the madness. Because Donald Trump is the one who forced California's hand. In between trying to apply a little gold covering to every square inch of the White House that he can, that hasn't been demolished, and pardoning billionaire criminals, President Trump's been making some phone calls. So's the vice president. They called GOP state lawmakers to withdraw congressional maps and to silence Democratic opposition. It began when President Trump called Texas Governor Greg Abbott and told him to find him 5 more Republican seats. When I first heard that, it sounded eerily similar to the call we all heard about from 2020 when President Trump called the Secretary of State of Georgia and demanded that he find him 11,000 more votes. When we knew what Texas was going to do, a midterm partisan redistricting, Californians knew right away that enough was enough. And that's what yesterday was all about, leveling the playing field. And by the way, at any moment, Republicans can actually end this redistricting arms race altogether, because there's more than just chatter about Ohio and Florida and Indiana and Missouri and others. To end that arms race, I invite my Republican colleagues to join us in supporting true nationwide redistricting reform. And yes, we do have a bill to do just that. Independent redistricting, once every 10 years after the census, which is when it should be properly done. But no, Republicans would rather try to cling to power by changing the rules of the game. And it's why just yesterday, the White House issued yet another threat, this time a threat to issue another illegal executive order to ban mail-in voting. And it's why, as races are being called last night, and Trump knew things were going to go his way, that the president took to social media to demand Republicans kill the filibuster, to ban mail-in voting and other laws that are designed to keep our elections secure, but make it easier for eligible United States citizens to exercise their fundamental right to vote, to cast their ballot and have their ballot be counted. That is what we're up against. But wait, there's more. At the same time, the Trump Department of Justice has its hands full. Boy, do they. The Department of Justice has sent letters to at least 40 different states demanding information about their voter maintenance policies and practices. And they filed lawsuits against 8 states, and probably growing, including California, who have refused to hand over the personal, private information of voters. Kind of reminds me of a game that kids sometimes play. Heads, I win, tails, you lose. What the administration is saying is, you can give us your voter rolls so we can start systematic purging, or you can choose to protect voter information, but we'll see you in court, and we're going to claim voter fraud anyways. But wait, there's more. Donald Trump is also staffing up the White House with like-minded election deniers and conspiracy theorists, hinting at future actions that could disenfranchise even more voters. Of course, the president's been slandering places like California in our elections practices for years, and he did it once again just yesterday on Election Day. His words, not mine. The president lies and shouts fraud without a shred of evidence. He didn't wait till Election Day. He started prior to, because he knew he was going to lose. The White House restated its threat to issue a new, even more illegal executive order to ban mail-in voting, despite the fact that the president himself votes by mail. And on top of all these brazen efforts, they're laying the groundwork for the nuclear option once again. Think about what we've seen over just the last few months. Troops deployed domestically into cities in response to pretend rebellions that only exist in Donald Trump's mind. You know, going back to this Proposition 50 in California, I was there with the governor, other state leaders, when we first launched the effort. We held a rally to announce a new legal, democratic ballot initiative, small d democratic, because ultimately it was going to be up to the voters to decide. The day of that rally, the day of that kickoff, don't tell me it was a coincidence. Who shows up at the doors and the perimeter of this building? Armed Border Patrol agents to try to intimidate people coming in to participate in the kickoff and the announcement. Now, the election deniers in the administration have been lobbying for the White House to declare a fake national emergency to try to seize unconstitutional powers over our elections. So I raise all these examples as a shocking reminder of how quickly Donald Trump is moving to upend our free and fair elections. But the reality is, none of this should be surprising. I know it's not to me, because he's done it before. It's been 5 years since Donald Trump first tried to steal the 2020 election. And since then, he's only grown more extreme. We all agree it's important to protect the security and integrity of our elections. But even at a moment in history like this, I remind myself American democracy was here long before MAGA, and it'll be here long before MAGA Republicans are no longer in power. But it will not be by accident. Members of Congress can and must stand up to every one of Trump's unconstitutional power grabs over state election authority. I'm committed to doing my part. If the Trump White House tries to declare some fake national emergency to create a pretense for federal intervention, I will force a vote here in the Senate to stop it. But no matter what happens, voters cannot lose hope. That's what's most important. We need Americans to keep showing up each and every election and show up in overwhelming numbers, just as they did yesterday, just as they did for hundreds of years prior, and make clear that it will be the people and only the people who will determine the future of our democracy. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.